This show is not a substitute for professional counseling, and no relationship is created between the show host or guests and any listener. If you feel you are in need of professional mental health and are a UA student, we encourage you to contact the UA Counseling Center at 348-3863. If you are not a UA student, please contact your respective county's crisis service hotline or their local mental health agency or insurance company. If it is an emergency situation, please call 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.
It's 6 o'clock and time again for Brain Matters, the official radio show of the UA Counseling Center. We are broadcasting from the campus of the University of Alabama. Good evening. My name is Dr. B.J. Guenther, and I'm the host of the show, along with my colleague and producer, Katherine Howell. And in case you don't know, this show is about mental and physical health issues that affect college students, and in particular, UA students. So you can listen to us each Tuesday night at 6 p.m. on 90.7 FM or online at wbuafm.ua.edu. Or you can also download the MyTuner Radio app and type in WVUA FM 90.7. If you have any, I ask for this every week, but if you have any upcoming ideas for upcoming show topics, email those to me at brainmattersradio@wvuafm.ua.edu. And of course, I'll consider using your show topic. We're probably at the middle point. We're about to go on spring break coming up next week. Yay. And when we come back, we'll probably have about 5 or 6 shows left to do for the spring semester. We don't do shows during the summer, but I'm always asking for show ideas to do maybe for the remainder of the semester and for the fall semester. So if you think the idea has already been done or it wouldn't be a good idea, go ahead and email those to me anyway, because we'll definitely consider it. It's always a good idea to do. You know, we had a show, I guess it was on a couple of weeks ago, about depression, and it's always a good idea, I think, to revisit some of the topics that are pretty common here at the Counseling Center: depression, anxiety, stress management, test anxiety, relationship, roommate issues. Those are a lot of sleep issues is a big one too. And so those are you can always talk about something with those topics. Tonight, though, is a very interesting, we've had a couple of shows in the past about college athletes, and tonight our topic is college athlete mental health in particular. And you know, the college years should be the happiest time of a young person's life, but the number of students experiencing mental health problems is rising, and student athletes are even more susceptible to emotional struggles due to their high pressure lifestyle. So I thought it would be a good idea to talk about that tonight. My guest is joining us tonight. Her name is Dr. Haley Perlus, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Dr. Perlus is a sport and performance psychologist, also a former elite Alpine Ski Racer. I can't wait to talk about that. Thank you for being on the show, Dr. Perlus.
Well, I'm so happy to be here, BJ. Thanks for choosing me.
You know, I gave just a little bit of snippet of your of your credentials, but can you tell the listeners a little more about yourself? Where are you located right now? And where did you do your Alpine ski racing? I'm curious. Where was your home base?
Sure. So I'm currently physically in Vail, Colorado.
I hate you.
I have to hop a plane to California after this, but definitely that's where I reside, in Vail, Colorado. But I am from Toronto in Canada, which is where I started my ski racing. So I grew up in Toronto, and long story short, I was a fairly decent Alpine ski racer when I was 12, and I was asked to go and compete in what would be considered the Junior World Championships for my age group.
Yes.
And I'm bib number 9, and bib number 8 is about to go. So I have about 45 seconds until it's my turn to compete. My coach comes up to me, pulls out $100 Canadian bill, places it in front of my nose, and tells me that he had bet on me to win this world championship for my age group.
Talk about pressure.
Pressure. Yeah. So, you know, all of the college athletes, or just any athletes that are listening to us right now, you know, in that moment, I was at an emotional and a mental fork in the road, something we are in each and every day of our lives. But you're right, pressure. But think about how you can interpret that situation. On one hand, sure, frustration, worry, anger, fear. How could a coach do that? What if I make a mistake? What if he's wrong? But on the other hand, wow, if he's betting on me, doesn't that mean he believes in me?
True.
So I can't tell you that at 12 years old, I went through that process in my head, but I do remember thinking, wow, if he has high expectations, doesn't that mean I'm doing something right?
That's a positive way to look at it, because it is a lot of high pressure, but it's a motivator too. That's basically what you're saying. Did it work? What happened?
It worked. I won the race. My coach came down, congratulated me, kept the money for himself. But he said something that started my career at 12 years old. He said, it's amazing what your performance can be when you get your head straight. And then 2 weeks later, he brought a sports psychologist to come and speak to my team. And I went home at 12 and I told my parents that that's what I wanted to do when I grew up. I wanted to do sports psychology.
I'm puzzled. I mean, that is amazing. That's amazing. I've worked with many. I've been here about 16 going on 17 years, I think. I've forgotten. It's just, it goes by fast, but I've worked with many student athletes here. And I was shocked, to be honest, and maybe you can talk about this a little bit, about their performance anxiety. Because in my mind, I played sports and I played for a junior college. I transferred here to Alabama and wasn't good enough to play, honestly, because a D1 school, it's hard to make it. It really is. And I played tennis. And, but the performance anxiety, I understand everybody, I think, gets a little bit nervous before whatever it is you do, whatever it is you perform, whether it's acting, whether it's singing, whether it's sports. I think that's healthy. But then there comes a point where performance anxiety can stifle you and paralyze you. Did you ever have to deal with that?
Absolutely. And you just, BJ, I was listening to the words you were using. Well done, by the way. You were saying, athletes all get nervous. We all get a little bit nervous. And of course we do. That's, butterflies in the stomach. That's the excitement. That's the passion. What nerves mean is that I care, I want, and I believe. That's what nerves mean.
Yes.
But when you start focusing on all the things that could go wrong or all the reasons why you must be perfect, and I use the word must, so we demand it, and all of the consequences or all of the rewards, if you focus on all of the things that create, and again, fear, frustration, worry, that now we've moved away from just being nervous into that field of anxiety. And the more anxious you feel, the less confident you feel.
It makes you doubt yourself. Makes you doubt yourself.
Yeah. And a little bit of doubt again is normal. But if you start really going down the rabbit hole of why I can't do this.
That's where it paralyzes you sometimes, What about the athletes that you have worked with over the years? What are the most common, let's just cut to the chase. What are the most common issues? Is it depression? Is it performance anxiety? Is it perfectionism? Where does that play into everything?
Yeah. I think the underlining is definitely an athlete will come with some type of story, so a mental block that has the potential to debilitate their performance. So it might be fear of failure, but it also might be fear of success. Yep. They don't realize it, but if they win, okay, now I've got the pressure to keep winning, and now everyone's going to expect me to win. So there's also the fear of success. There's a fear of injury, obviously. That's a big one.
Yes.
Depression. I'm a performance psychology, so I'm not necessarily clinical. I'm more educational, as they say.
Yes.
But definitely lack of confidence can lead to having depressed thoughts, depressed feelings. You may not actually have depression, and there's a big difference between the just like depression.
Low mood. I usually call it like a low mood. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So all those things, not connecting with the coach, not connecting with your teammates, the other pressures of having to achieve some sort of academic level. And then athletes at the collegiate level, in my opinion, get pulled in so many different ways. There's so much opportunity, and sometimes that opportunity is anxiety producing.
Well, and you add the new NIL situation. I don't know what you call it, NIL deals. That's added pressure right there, especially at a school like the University of Alabama when it, we're looking at football, basketball, gymnastics, it's softball. That's already to me, that's another added pressure. It's good. It's a benefit. I get that. But you're right. When you have the pressure to continue to win, or else you're going to lose contracts, you're going to lose, promotions, et cetera, et cetera. It's
grown-up stuff. It's grown-up stuff.
It's grown-up stuff. It's professional stuff. What about, I always say I like working with athletes to some extent. Now, I have had some, when I've worked on relaxation techniques that just some of the guys just like roll their eyes, they used to like roll their eyes like, I'm not doing that. But here's the thing. The athlete has characteristics like discipline and motivation a lot of times that make them a little bit different than some of the non-athletic students, I guess, that I see sometimes. And because of their discipline, they will do what you ask of them. Like if I make a suggestion, they're very good about, they might roll their eyes, but they're good about doing what you ask of them. And that I like that.
Coachable.
You can work with. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, athletes are coachable because they've had coaches their whole lives. What about, I had a student athlete I saw yesterday, and he plays on a team sport. And he said that they're doing better this year because the team was more cohesive this year. That's the word we used. And he said, as compared to last year, there was one person who basically ruined it for the whole team. Do you ever have to deal with that? Do you ever have to deal with speaking to a whole team? Absolutely. And group cohesion is group cohesion is what leads to group productivity.
Yes.
You don't always have to have the best players out there, but if you have a cohesive unit, we can coordinate, we can be fluid together. We can connect dots that you wouldn't necessarily be able to if you only had the physically best athletes. So group cohesion is key. And sometimes we make a mistake by focusing on the one athlete that's not cooperating instead of just kind of focusing on the things that are working.
Yeah.
And not giving that one athlete the stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think that's the issue a lot of times. It was in this case, I'll tell you that, with the person I was talking about. We're going to take a break in just a minute, and when we come back, let's talk about the characteristics that student athletes possess. How about that? We'll be right back. You're listening to 90.7 The Capstone.
WVUA-FM, Tuscaloosa.
This show is not a substitute for professional counseling, and no relationship is created between the show host or guests and any listener. If you feel you are in need of professional mental health and are a UA student, we encourage you to contact the UA Counseling Center at 348-3863. If you are not a UA student, please contact your respective county's crisis service hotline or their local mental health agency or insurance company. If it is an emergency situation, please call 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.
You're back listening to 90.7 The Capstone. You're listening to Brain Matters, and we're talking tonight with Dr. Haley Perlus, who is a sport and performance psychologist and also a former Alpine Ski Racer, which is amazing to me. And we're talking about college student athletes and mental health. I think it's so important. I think sometimes this is a topic that people either don't want to touch or they just forget about the college student athlete. There's here on our campus, the athletes have their certain sports. I will say it this way: certain sports have their own individual mental health programs that cater to them, and their particular sport. But some universities and some colleges do not have that. They don't have the luxury of that. And I get that. How, when we left off before the break, I asked you, what are some characteristics that student athletes possess?
Great question, BJ. And we did touch on it. You touched on it with the word discipline.
Yeah.
So athletes are very disciplined, but sometimes that can be a detriment because then you become almost, there's something called exercise addiction. There's something called so tunnel vision, so rigid. But discipline is definitely a very positive quality until obviously it no longer is positive. But discipline, I would say resilience. So we learn very quickly in sports, and athletes at the collegiate level are going to be learning this. That will take them to whether they become pro or in any of their life endeavors. We all strive for perfection, but we cannot demand it of ourselves because there's no such thing in sports. The athlete who stands on top of the podium, the team who wins at the end of the day, is not the perfect team or the perfect athlete. It's the one who best recovers from mistakes. So athletes need to learn to be resilient. They fall down, they get back up. It's all about next shot, next shot, next shot. Yes. That is a characteristic that athletes, that collegiate level athletes are learning to have or have, which help them stand out.
I would think also rejection.
Learning to whether it's just flat out being rejected and
right.
or just, you have to learn to lose. I actually recorded this on one of my weekly videos that I do. I think just right after the Super Bowl, I recorded a video on how to lose because, and there's some great examples of these professional athletes who know how to lose so that they can quickly win the next day.
I know. And in some cases, you have to learn to turn it around after the next play.
Right.
Play after play. And some are really good at it and some are not. Do you find that the ones who, I don't know how to ask this, the ones who have more of a passion, more of a reaction, more anger, are they coachable? Are they more easily coachable, I guess,
I think every athlete is coachable, but you need a good coach. But you need to be every athlete. Listen, if they've gotten to the collegiate level, there is some definite motivation, definite drive, definite confidence. And so the person who is working with them, be it a sports psychologist or a coach or a conditioning trainer or a teammate, you got to find the moments that are going to help, the key moments. So timing is everything, but then also you got to find the little sparks. And then you got to feed those sparks. You got to water those thought seeds.
So what are some characteristics then of a good coach versus a bad coach? And you can use your personal life as an example.
I will be
Alpine Ski Racer.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. So of course, I'm not telling all these coaches to go bet on their athletes, right? I'm not going to. But I will tell you that coach goes down as one of my top 3 coaches that I've ever had in my entire life because he took the time to know me.
Yes.
He took the time to understand me. When he put that pressure on me, it was him telling me, I believe in you. And if you don't have that relationship with your coach, it is not going to work. So it goes hand in hand, though. You can't put all the pressure, all the ownership on the coach. Athletes have to play a role too.
That's right. I feel like some athletes are motivated by an example you've given. And then some, I don't know, I think some athletes that doesn't work for, being really hard on them does not work for them. And it's up to the coach to recognize that.
You definitely have to figure it out. We call it thick-skinned or thin-skinned or, being able to hear. But here's the thing. I believe that you can take the feedback more constructively if you have something that we call unconditional confidence. There's conditional.
I'm writing that down.
Yeah. The conditional confidence comes and goes with the results.
Yes.
The unconditional confidence stays no matter what. You might feel that you made a mistake. You might feel that you didn't play well. You let your teams down one day, but deep inside at the core, you have confidence that is not going to come and go every day with the results. And that allows us to listen to our coaches. That allows us to get up when we've fallen down. That allows us to focus on not just the trophy, but also the heart of the team and the heart of our performance.
Yes.
So, if we can highlight athletes' unconditional confidence, oh man, that athlete can realize their true potential.
That's the key. Do you still ski? How often do you still ski?
Well, I do live in Vail, Colorado, which is so I have a mountain literally in my backyard. I do ski at least once a week, but I went on a snowshoe this morning. I went for a full moon skin. If anyone knows what skinning is, you put these carpets on the bottom of your skis and you hike up the mountain and then you take the carpets off and you ski down. Did that last night in a full moon. So yes, I do. And I think, talking about that, BJ, it's really interesting. I don't know. I do know that I'm one of the few ski racers that I grew up with that still like to ski. A lot of athletes got burned out.
Burned out.
No longer part of their life.
And you know what? I hear that from some college athletes. They get burned out. What do you think causes that?
Burnout?
Yeah.
Well, burnout is
for an athlete.
Yeah, burnout is a couple of things. The emotional exhaustion and the mental exhaustion is one of the characteristics. But I think athletes, when we're not doing well, and I have struggled with this, and then I had to learn. But when we're not doing well, we don't stop and take a moment. We just go harder, faster, stronger, and we sink further and further into our quicksand of burnout. Yeah. And athletes don't take a breath. I can't because then everyone, my colleagues are going, my coach, this is the schedule. I got to keep going. But I will tell you the quickest way to burnout is to not recover. The only prevention of burnout, the only treatment of burnout too, is recovery. But athletes don't think about that. They just got to go harder, faster, stronger.
Right. And I think the competition too, it's always on you. Like, who's going to take my place? If I do rest and recover, who's going to take my place?
Right.
Is somebody going to take it?
Yeah, but we got to bring the logic back. I mean, you go into the weight room and you do your chest press. And if you were to do the exact same reps and sets and weights the next day, you're not going to be as good. You need 24 hours at least to recover. It is the exact same with our mental and our emotional strengths.
Okay, I've got an email question here for you. And there is some skiing involved in the question. Interesting. What are some good tips for overcoming fear and building confidence when learning a new athletic skill? Example, how to overcome, this is somebody who skis, how to overcome fear and get out of your head when progressing from an easier intermediate terrain to more challenging and steeper terrain when skiing.
That's hilarious.
Wow.
Well, and listen, this will definitely apply for skiing, but it applies for everything. As you're going up the level of development, so as you're, getting up on a steeper incline, whatever that is for you in your sport, you always bring your fundamental strengths with you. So yes, there's going to be some new things that you need to learn, but if we can focus, and I like to choose three things that that you've got. So skiing is pressing on the front of the boot, pole plant, finishing my turn. If you bring those three things and that you have them, they're already in your skill set, and you bring that to the next level, you'll be in good shape. Instead of saying, okay, this is a whole new environment. It's not a whole new environment. Your body's still the same. And if you're switching sports, so you're now learning a different sport.
Yeah.
A lot of disciplines are transferable. Do you have a strong core? Do you have good hand-eye coordination? Do you have good agility? Focus on what your strengths are. And then when you transition to a different sport, see what strengths you can bring from one sport to the next. Highlight your strengths. It's my greatest piece of advice to help people in that situation.
Wow. How important is athletic department support? And, how much does that contribute to an athlete's stress? I don't know if you were able to ski in college for a team. I don't know how that works. But how important is the athletic department support?
I mean, huge. Yes, I was in Canada, so our sports programs are vastly different than in the United States. But yes, I was on a college ski team. I did go to the University World Championships. And I think it is huge. We are getting so much better at receiving and acknowledging, performance psychology.
Yes.
I believe I actually have a positive outlook on this. I believe more and more coaches, more and more trainers, more and more athletes are being open to it.
Yes,
but sometimes I'm still being asked to not say that I'm a sports psychologist and so say I'm a coach or even a friend, on the sidelines. But I'm okay with that. I'm not going to focus on that. I'm going to focus on someone asked for my help and I'm going to give them my help. And then when they start improving, people ask why, and then they start sharing.
Is it because, do they not want you to share that because it is threatening or intimidating in some way?
Could be. It could be some kind of weakness. It could be, be all of those things. Absolutely. And that's okay. Let's work on it. Let's get you better results. Let's get you stronger. And then when people come and ask you, you can say, well, I worked from my neck up so that the neck down could do its thing. And there are athletes that are perfectly, they have the self-assurance to speak up. And I would encourage them to continue to speak up.
What about cultural differences? What about teams or individuals that you've worked with who are international? I mean, you were from Canada, but still, I'm talking about other cultures who do not accept mental health issues, help with the mental health issues.
Sure. It's when people ask me, almost, how to be creative in this, there's always ways to be creative about this. And even though it might not be culturally acceptable or team acceptable, there's always, in my experience, there's always one person who's open-minded. So if you can get to that one person and then you can figure out a way, like if everyone's stretching, okay, while we're stretching, we can just incorporate a little bit of a visualization.
Yes.
You kind of sneak. It's like, I never used to like spinach I was not a spinach eater, but then I started hiding spinach in my food and now I can eat spinach. With mental toughness.
Okay, that's a good analogy. I can get it. That's good. We're going to take another quick break. We've got a few more email questions if you're willing. And I've got a question about athletic trainers. So hang on. You're listening to Brain Matters on 90.7 The Capstone.
WVUA-FM, Tuscaloosa.
This show is not a substitute for professional counseling, and no relationship is created between the show host or guests and any listener. If you feel you are in need of professional mental health and are a UA student, we encourage you to contact the UA Counseling Center at 348-3863. If you are not a UA student, please contact your respective county's crisis service hotline or their local mental health agency or insurance company. If it is an emergency situation, please call 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.
You're back listening to Brain Matters on 90.7 The Capstone. I'm BJ Guenther, and we're talking tonight about college athlete mental health. And my guest is Dr. Haley Perlus, who is a sport and performance psychologist, also a former Alpine Ski Racer. And when we left off, we were talking about athletic department support, basically. But how important is an athletic trainer? Is that a vital person to get? Sometimes we get the referrals from athletic trainers because they're the first persons to recognize what's going on.
I agree. Sometimes they're the first person to recognize it. Other times they're the first person that athletes go to.
Yes.
Because they're not on the field. They're off the field. They're on the field, but you know what I mean? Like they're like the sideline trainers, like the conditioning or whatever coaches. So it's hugely important because they often get to see the athletes when the athletes are vulnerable, whether it's the timing that they're the most vulnerable, right before, right after a competition, leading up to a competition, or they just have that trust and relationship with the athletic trainer that they're more willing to let them see that.
Well, and also I feel like sometimes they share personal things with the trainer that doesn't even have really anything to do with their sport.
Happens to me all the time. I mean, I definitely, I know my lane, but absolutely, when I'm working with athletes, I get to learn. I've helped, I've edited or reviewed some college essays. And I've
a time or two
talked about boyfriends and girlfriends. I mean, it's all parents,
coaches, even.
It's all encompassing.
Let's take this next email question isn't obvious. I think this is a great question. It's obvious. How can an athlete prepare mentally before participating in an athletic event?
So it's an interesting thing, because in training and practice, we're always looking to see what we can improve. I got to do this better. I got to do that better. And I'm a big believer that when you walk onto that competitive field, I want my athletes to be highlighting their strengths.
Mm-hmm.
I want my athletes to know what they do well, go out there, let those shine through. And with that confidence and energy, because you've been training on those other areas of improvement, they're going to peek in and peek through. But I was just working with an athlete, 18 years old. So last week, and he's not feeling so good about himself. And he was really focused on using keywords, which is great. That's a mental tough.
Give an example. Keywords would be
he had to drive through. He's like, I just need to drive through. Yeah. And I asked him, well, is that something that you already do? He's like, no, I need to do that in order to do well. I'm like, yeah, but you're not feeling confident right now. Right. Let's change your keywords to something you can do.
That you're doing already.
Right. Get out there and highlight your strengths. The other thing I will tell you, we talked about one of the characteristics of the best athletes out there, in my humble opinion, is resiliency. In our visualization, and we all visualize, we all daydream. Athletes typically like to visualize perfection.
Yeah.
I want you to visualize falling down and getting back up. So whatever falling down means, it doesn't necessarily mean physically falling down, but making a mistake and recovering, your teammate making a mistake and recovering, not playing your best and then recovering. I want you to visualize that, because that's great sport prep as well.
What's the difference between a life coach and a mental health counselor? Is that another session?
It really depends. A mental health counselor will typically have some type of academic
training.
A life coach may have taken a certification here or there, or not at all. They just call themselves a life coach, or they may actually have gone through. So mental health counselor, when there's a counselor at the end, it typically means that they have some type of formal academic training. A life coach, I would want to know the question. I would want to ask, because it doesn't necessarily tell you. Right. I have a PhD. That tells you things. I went through 10 years of education. I have a doctorate of philosophy. I did it tells you certain things. A life coach, and I'm not putting life coaches down. I mean, I don't necessarily think you need to have a PhD to do this at all. It's not what I'm saying. I would just want to ask the question, how did they get to be where they are? And what are their lines of training? And
what's your experience? That kind of thing.
And they may have great experience of working it.
Oh yeah. How about have you ever worked with an athlete who is a part of a team whose something tragic happened, and you had to support them as a team? And I can give you, I've worked with an athlete who was a part of a team, and there was a car accident. I'm just going to say it that way. And someone was killed. And that was difficult, because they were in the middle of a season and I feel like they lost a lot of their focus. So how do you reel that back in? How do you help those athletes on the team? Have you ever had to do anything like that?
With a tragedy like that, with a team experience such as that, the technique that I would use, and it's not even really a technique, but I call it accept and act. So this is not about just, okay, let's do it for this player and get up and go. There needs to be a moment for these athletes to process this. There needs to be a moment for these athletes to accept what has gone on, to be able to openly talk about the fear and the sadness. And they will find that they will actually build some cohesiveness. I don't want to think that you're, getting something out of this experience, like using it only to be positive. But when you're able to confide in each other and cry with each other and just take the time necessary to accept it. And then collectively, and you might have to reframe the win or change some goals around, but collectively come up with what we can take action on now.
Yeah.
So accept and act, and there needs to be time for both.
And everybody has to understand that, the coaches too. What about, have you worked with many athletes on fame?
So
how to handle recognition, how to handle fame.
Yeah. So a couple of things. A lot of people, especially at this stage of the game, at this level of your development, you're starting to become famous.
Yeah.
And first of all, you've earned that. So a lot of people will say that it actually creates anxiety. It creates pressure. And a lot of athletes can actually have debilitating performances because of it.
Yeah.
And now I have all this pressure. Well, let's just reframe that. You've earned that pressure.
Mm-hmm. You've worked hard for your whole life, just about.
Right. However, if you let that fame take over, that's another way that you can become burnt out. So I earlier mentioned trophy and heart. So there's two types of motivation, intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation is the trophy, the fame, the scholarship, the medal.
NIL. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all those things. Heart motivation, intrinsic motivation is doing it for the pure love.
Yeah.
So if you have fame, awesome. You've earned that. If you like it, use it. But please, please, please do not neglect the heart. Make sure that you are balancing that heart motivation with that trophy motivation.
I've got another, this is the last email question. What are some principles, and I don't think we've answered this yet, but maybe, what are some principles that you use to help athletes improve performance that can be translated into helping students achieve academic success and personal growth?
That's a great.
That's a good question.
So I'm a big believer in pre-performance routines. So in sports, we talk about that all the time, and athletes don't even really have to. Some don't even consciously do it. They just unconsciously just have this routine. That you can bring into your studies as well. Pre-performance routine. What music do you listen to? What warm-ups do you need? What type of people do you want to be around you? What kind of preparation ahead of time puts you in a spot where you are most confident, most motivated, and most focused? And if you can use those techniques you've learned in sports and transition them into your studies, it'll be impactful.
That's why it's fun to work with athletes, because not only the discipline, like I mentioned, but the self-awareness. Most of them are very self-aware, and they know, like you're talking about, they know what they need to be at their peak performance. They really do. Mm-hmm. What's your routine?
I am a big believer in music. So I have 3 words that I strive for before I'm about to present, if you will. The word bright, the word curious, and the word listen. So I usually either get myself outside and put my face in the sun or my feet in the grass and listen to some fun music to get me bright. Curiosity, I read, I ask questions. So whether I'm texting with an athlete right before I'm about to present, I just get curious about things. Not necessarily news. I get curious about people that I'm working with. And listening, I too listen to podcasts. So I tune out of my own inner voice, because sometimes it's not me, it's my area of expertise. And sometimes I'm negative. Yeah. So I tune out of my own inner voice. I tune into something else so that I'm bright, I'm curious, and I'm listening. And then I can go out there and perform my best.
And you're more focused too.
Focused, motivated, confident, happy.
You mentioned injuries. Let's talk about that, because I've seen some athletes too who have endured injuries, in fact, so bad that they couldn't go back to their sport. How do you deal with that? What do you tell people? What do you tell athletes?
That it sucks, and it does. And you have to be able to acknowledge the fact that it sucks. We don't want to sugarcoat this. Yes. But then once again, you acknowledge the fact that and accept it, then you can take action on what's next. Couple of things. When athletes get injured, they tend to have a lot of attention right at the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
And they are quickly forgotten about. So, and that can be devastating. So I always encourage athletes that are injured to go out there and offer support to their teammates. And then law of reciprocity. When you offer support, you'll get support back. Do not ask people to only come to you. Go to them first. Ask how they're doing. Ask if you can video practice. Do something for your teammates. They will then, in return, give you the support you need. So that's one thing. The other thing is that rehab is your new sport. And you got to treat it like that.
Yeah.
You got to treat it like that. So you come up with goals, you come up with competitions, you come up with baselines. You treat it like it's your new temporary sport. And then when you get back on the field, same as always, go and highlight your strengths, get yourself some positive energy, and use that to get back to where you were and further.
Do you ever use other very famous athletes to set examples when you're trying to, motivate another athlete who's been injured? That's a weird question. Do you know what I mean?
No, but it's a great question. I don't necessarily certainly I have little video snippets of interviews, but if I'm working with an athlete in some sport, I'll just ask them who they like to watch.
That's a good idea.
And if that athlete, which can be quite often, have suffered an injury, well, how did that athlete recover? How did they get back? If they can do it, so can I. It's a concept called vicarious experience. If they can do it, so can I.
It's to me, it's so hard to talk about an injury with somebody because sometimes they can return back to their sport. It may take them a year of rehab, but sometimes they never can return back. Those are the hardest ones, obviously, because a lot of times, like you said, their university, their college sometimes will just I don't want to say turn on them, but you know what I mean? They will just forget about them. And then sometimes these athletes are pulling the weight for their families too.
It's a business. And so, and it is not a business for the athlete. It is
for everybody else though.
It is their life. And yes, it is sad, and they're not doomed. There are things we can do.
Plenty of things, maybe even coaching.
Maybe
even sport and performance psychology.
Maybe
we're gonna take our last break, and when we come back for our last segment, I want to ask you what college counseling centers can do to support college athletes. So stay tuned. We're coming right back. You're listening to Brain Matters on 90.7 The Capstone.
WVUA-FM, Tuscaloosa.
This show is not a substitute for professional counseling, and no relationship is created between the show host or guest and any listener. If you feel you are in need of professional mental health and are a UA student, we encourage you to contact the UA Counseling Center at 348-3863. If you are not a UA student, please contact your respective county's crisis service hotline or their local mental health agency or insurance company. If it is an emergency situation, please call 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.
Hey, you're back listening to Brain Matters on 90.7 The Capstone. We're talking tonight with Dr. Haley Perlus about college athlete mental health. And Haley is a sport and performance psychologist, also a former Alpine Ski Racer, which sounds extremely dangerous to me. Have you had injuries that were debilitating at times, or that you had to, I'm sure you've had injuries, any athlete has over the years when you've done it for so long, but have you ever had to have a lot of rehab that took time where you had to really dig down deep, to convince yourself that everything's going to be okay, yada, yada?
I was relatively lucky. In my sport, you get a whole lot of ACL, knee tears and knee injuries and back injuries. I did have something called compartment syndrome. It's actually not a lot of skiers get it. It put me out for a little bit. I wasn't off the snow for a long time, but I was not training with my teammates for a long time. So while they were in the course practicing, I was free skiing beside them, and that was hard. And that was lonely. And my coaches were really, really great. And my parents were really, really great. And so you do have to have a good support system.
Where's the most fun place you've skied?
I had a great experience a couple years ago. It was during COVID though, so I didn't get to go everywhere, but Jackson Hole, I mean, I had powder over my head. I mean, it was just unbelievable. But this past weekend, I was lucky enough to do these first tracks where you get to go on the mountain an hour before everyone else. And 7 inches had fallen, and we just did over these freshly groomed. So we were powder over this groom. It was great.
Was it Winter Storm Piper? You know, they name all the winter storms now. Winter Storm Piper, Winter Storm. I lose track now. There's so many.
It was just another day with 7 inches. No big deal.
How about, okay, I got to ask you this. Maybe this is inappropriate, but, that's my middle name. What about avalanches?
I have never been, but my boyfriend was caught in an avalanche with his snowmobile, and he was caught underneath. His head was out, but his snowmobile found him, and he was in there for 14 minutes.
Terrifying.
And they came over to him and they saw that he could breathe and they saw that he was alive. So they left him there to go find others.
Terrifying. Yeah.
Which was the right thing to do.
I know.
That was an experience that he had. Mm-hmm.
I always wonder about that with skiers, who have done it for years. What about counseling centers? How can we better support college athletes? What should we know or get more education on regarding the specific struggles of college athletes?
There is the concept of waiting for athletes to come to you, which I understand sometimes has to happen. So a counseling program at a college, you're there, you're open, but I also like the idea of going to the athletes. So, it takes 15 minutes, like I said from earlier, while you're stretching to do a visualization training. So counselors, if they do have the time, or choose to, just introduce yourself with a visualizing exercise, make yourself known, make it that it is clinical. So there is, anger management, substance abuse, there is that, but then there's also performance psychology.
Yep.
And once athletes get in, they may get in first for performance psychology and then be available to have help with their clinical stuff as well.
We've had referrals from athletic trainers used to. I don't know if we have as many now, but when I first started working here, we used to have referrals from the trainers who, the athlete will have gotten in trouble. They've been abusing drugs or some trouble that they've gotten in. So it was a punitive, referral. So when they come in, they're already guarded. That's difficult to work with an athlete, because they didn't really choose to come. But sometimes it's like what you said. Sometimes once they loosened up a little bit, they would utilize the service and we would talk about other things besides what happened, So that's interesting. Do you have any resources for listeners? Like podcasts? You mentioned one that you do. Podcast, websites, books?
The best thing right now, I'm actually in the middle of writing a book, but the best thing is that every week I do a mental toughness moment video. It's a 3-minute video. You can find it on YouTube. Just search my name, or you can also go to my website, HaleyPerlus.com, opt in, and I send you an email every week with this video. Mm-hmm. You don't have to search for it. It'll come to you, as we just said.
Yeah.
And it's just, 3-minute videos on a tip, just little tips on how to do this, little tips on how to do that. And obviously my focus is sport, but we apply it to all aspects of life.
And mental toughness is?
What is mental toughness?
Yeah, what is mental toughness?
Oh, great question. Mental toughness, in my opinion, is showing up when you don't necessarily want to. So maybe those early morning trainings, or when you've had a bad day, or whether you're not feeling your best, showing up when you don't want to, accepting that there's going to be some discomfort, maybe even some pain, but accepting that, not trying to fight it, accepting it. And then again, it's striving for perfection, but never demanding it, giving it every ounce of effort you have to give that day. If you only have 70%, you give all of that 70%.
Good advice. That's good advice for any student.
Oh, yeah.
Not just the athlete, not just the college.
And for all of us, for me, for you. Yeah.
Me,
absolutely.
big time. Thank you so much. I told you it goes by fast. This is great. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed this immensely. And, our shows are recorded and podcasted to the Apple Podcast. They're also, some of our past shows are on audioboom.com. They're also on voices.ua.edu, and you can access that through the Counseling Center's website at counseling.ua.edu. So don't forget that. Thanks again, Dr. Perlus, for being on the show. I always like to thank some other people who've made the show possible. Dr. Greg Vanderwall, he's our executive director here at the Counseling Center. Terry Seegers from the Office of Student Media, my production assistant, and my colleague, Catherine Howell, my other colleagues at the Counseling Center, and the WVUA staff who will edit our shows. Like I said, my guest tonight, and then next week is spring break, but we're going to have an anniversary show. I mentioned this is our 10th year doing Brain Matters, so we're going to have an anniversary show after spring break with 3 guests who were really instrumental in helping me develop and create the show. So tune in next week, but then in a couple of weeks for the anniversary show. Thanks again for listening. Have a great night. Good night.
This show is not intended as a substitute for professional counseling. Further, the views, opinions, and conclusions expressed by the show hosts or their guests are their own and not necessarily those of the University of Alabama, its officers, or trustees. Any views, opinions, or conclusions shared on the show do not create a relationship between the host or any guest and any listener, and such a relationship should never be inferred. If you feel you are in need of professional mental health and are a UA student, please contact the UA Counseling Center at 348-3863. If you are not a UA student, please contact your respective county's crisis service hotline or their local mental health agency or insurance company.